Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. I'm your host, the Game Master, and today we're talking about the Guardians of the Galaxy, the Legion of Superheroes, the Green Lantern Corps, the new Gold Lantern Corps, and just all sorts of stuff. But before we get into that, smash like, make sure you're subscribed, and leave us a comment. We've got a great community here, and it's all thanks to you. So thank you so much for being here. With all that said, let's dive in. Prologue to this one is a brief recap of a handful of relevant adventures. So, Chris Kent was the son of Superman in the 1980s when he was possessed by Lor Zod. This was us doing a mashup of the pre crisis Chris Kent and the post crisis Chris Kent. And after that, he became the Superboy of the 1980s. And then Doctor Strange made everybody forget that he was Superboy, including him. And then in the 90s, he thought that the reason he could fly, have super strength, etc., was because he was a mutant. So he joined a local team of young heroes, and they called him Powerhouse. He graduated from high school in 1994, and that team disbanded. For college, he went to Westchester, New York, to the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters. During that time, he was a member of a team led by Banshee and Emma Frost, known as Generation X. In 1996, a ton of superheroes attended the unveiling of a ship called the USS Nemeton. Villains attacked, and during the battle, a Green Lantern named Gnort was attacked by Juggernaut and slain. A young anti-hero named Kelson Barber took Gnort's ring, becoming a Green Lantern. And a year after that, Kelson was taken out by a group of time travelers who said had they not slain Kelson when they did, he would have gone on to destroy the world with that power ring. So Powerhouse hung onto that Green Lantern ring, and shortly after that, he began to train the next generation of Green Lantern recruits how to be heroes. After that, Mongol recruited Chris for an army that would fight Imperiex, and his Kryptonian solar cells were recharged. And now he knew Superman was his father, too, and together they fought Imperiex. Not long after that, crisis after crisis struck Earth, and in one of them, the original Superman was killed by an alternate Superboy wearing the armor of the Anti-Monitor. So Chris Kent took up the mantle of Superman. He did his best for years, but one day had a run in with Dr. Manhattan, who created gold kryptonite out of thin air. Chris was once again robbed of his Kryptonian powers. His nephew, Clark Kent III, took over as the new Superman. But Chris wasn't sure what to do with himself. His whole life had been leading up to his time as Superman, and now that those days were over, he felt like his life was over. Which brings us to the main plot. Chris is wearing Callson's old Green Lantern power ring now, and he's fighting crime under the name Green Lantern when a time bubble shows up one day. A time bubble is a kind of time machine used by the Legion of Superheroes, who are a team of superheroes who hail from roughly 1,000 years in the future. Several times in the past, a blonde haired, green skinned teenager named Brainiac 5, a descendant of the modern day Brainiacs, would appear and ask a modern hero to come back to the future with him to help out with some crisis. That's what happens now, but this Brainiac is much older. He shaves his head, and his green face has wrinkles. The older, wiser Brainiac refers to Chris as Superman, and a sad Chris replies that he isn't Superman anymore. Brainy offers a slight smile and says Chris will always be Superman. And as before, the Legion needs his help. Chris is a teacher now, so he reaches in a big drawer in the bottom of his desk where his Green Lantern power battery is hidden. He places his power ring to it and he recites the oath. In brightest day and blackest night, no evil shall escape my sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power, Green Lantern's light. And with that, his power ring now has a 24-hour charge. He gets into the high-tech transparent time bubble with Brainy, and the two of them travel back to the future. When they arrive there, Green Lantern is shocked by what he sees. Gone is the pristine utopia of the Legion's era. They have arrived at the apocalypse. And in the middle of it all is a kaiju-sized red beast that seems like it's part dragon and part hydra. It has 7 heads, and each head should have 2 horns. But during the battle, 4 horns were knocked off of it. Green Lantern asks Brainiac what that thing is. And Brainiac 5 says it is the embodiment of all evil in the Omniverse. That's why it wears crowns. It's the king. Green Lantern has so many questions, but instead of standing around talking, he leaps into action. He fights Old Scratch with the help of the Legion and the Guardians of the Galaxy, and the battle to end all battles commences. The earth quakes, the sky is full of thunder and lightning. The colossal red dragon uses some sort of breath weapon, which is water, but it is so much water, it's like shooting an entire river at your enemy. Many of the heroes are swept away or overpowered. Serving the dragon are Magog from Kingdom Come, as well as Gog from the Kingdom. As Green Lantern fights Magog, erecting a glowing green force field to block blasts from Magog's blaster staff, the Spectre shows up. He creates glowing green chains around the kaiju-sized dragon, binding him. Yondu, Vance Astro, Nikki, Martin X, and Charlie 27 dogpile the villain known as Gog. And this battle rages on for so long that Green Lantern's ring eventually loses power. It's been 24 hours of nonstop fighting. In the middle of everything going on, the elders of Oa appear to Chris and offer him a gold lantern ring. It's a long story, but Green Lanterns are no longer legally allowed on Earth due to a Green Lantern named Vidar and his son, Ron Vidar, who went on to become a villain named Universo. Anyways, so the Owens are not violating that agreement by offering him a gold lantern ring. Chris accepts it and gets back into the fight. He substitutes his Omni power for power reserve, and the way he has it set up, the thing it fuels is his willpower, which in turn is what fuels the Omni power. So this cycle causes him to build up energy like a Dragon Ball character until finally he blasts Magog with it and the villain is knocked out. Which brings us to the epilogue. Once again, the Legion time bubble travels back to the 21st century. It arrives just a moment after it had first been there. The Gold Lantern steps out into his classroom, and the wise old Brainiac 5 thanks him for his help. Brainiac knows that Chris feels old and past his prime, like his story is over. But from Brainiac's vantage point, Chris still has a lot of adventures ahead of him. So he shares this with the new Gold Lantern and assures him that there are a lot of people who still need him. Chris thanks his old friend and they say their farewells. And with that, Brainiac 5 gets back in the time bubble and goes back to the future. Chris uses Instachange and changes back into his street clothes before one of his students walks in on him. He sits down at his desk and he reflects on his life, staring out the window at the leaves falling. The falling leaves feel like a fitting metaphor. Just as the seasons of the year change, giving way to the next season, so too has another season of his life ended, making way for the next chapter. And that was it for this game. This was a game that we re-ran, actually. We ran the first version of this back on Y2K, when a lot of people were talking about whether or not Y2K was going to be the end of the world. And the first time around, we had Chris go back to being Powerhouse again. That's a long story, but he had Body of Metal from GURP Supers. And way back when, he looked a lot like Colossus with a silver colored body. And as a big fan of the original 1980s Transformers animated series, I had ripped off the ending of that cartoon in which the silver colored metallic world of Cybertron was transformed into a golden colored metallic world. So, likewise, we had said that Powerhouse's silver colored body was transformed into a golden colored body in that first version of this adventure. But all these years later, my son really seems to like the name Powerhouse. So in our game world, he wanted that metallic body, which we refer to as a techno symbiote. It's supposed to be something akin to the T-1000 from Terminator 2, and it grants the wearer flight, strength, lasers, etc. Anyways, so since various time travelers in our game keep going back to the past, like this year's game where Eldridge went back to the 50s and changed things, we said that in the timeline she created, my son is Powerhouse 2 now, and he's the one with the techno symbiote. So instead, for inspiration, we looked at Chris's history teaching the Green Lanterns, which was one of the most popular games I ever ran, by the way. And we decided to rerun this adventure, this time with him starting off the beginning of the adventure as a Green Lantern. And then by the time it was over, it's the ring that would be gold. And for those wondering, the Gold Power Ring's first appearance is Superman Volume 5, issue number 14, which was published in October of 2019. And that comic, they said that the Gold Lantern of the 31st century was Kala Lure, but they also made drastic changes to the Legion of Superheroes that contradicted earlier Legion stories. So we decided to just ignore the existence of Kala Lure altogether. Later on, if we do want to do something with him, we could always have him find the gold ring years after the death of Chris Kent, something like that. But for now, we enjoy having Chris running around as our Gold Lantern in the 21st century. Speaking of enjoyment, we hope that you enjoyed this adventure. If so, as always, we would love it if you took a moment of your time to smash that like button, make sure you're subscribed, and leave a comment. And from everyone here at the longest running superhero role playing game on earth, we hope you have a good one, and we'll see you in the next adventure. Bye.